Olá, boa noite. Tem gente que até hoje aponta como uma surpresa a ascensão da chamada nova direita na política do Brasil e do mundo. Médio, bem médio surpresa. Surpreendeu-se mais quem adotou, como boa parte da esquerda, a estratégia do avestruz, escondeu a cabeça na areia de suas próprias convicções. Pois então, para antipatizantes ou simpatizantes que queiram entender como a velha direita se renovou e voltou às linhas de frente do poder, este é o melhor livro para começar. Guerra pela Eternidade, o retorno do tradicionalismo e a ascensão da direita populista. E olha, a renovação veio do passado pré-fascista, da escola filosófica do tradicionalismo, que, entre outras coisas, defende o resgate de antigas religiões que tenham uma base comum de crenças e ensinamentos perdidos com o tempo e que devem ser recuperados. Por décadas, o tradicionalismo foi uma obscura doutrina de traços esotéricos, com S, defendida pelos poucos seguidores de filósofos como o francês René Guénon e o italiano Giulio Evola. No século XXI, deu-se a aliança entre tradicionalismo e militância política. E aí, em 3 dos maiores países do mundo, chegaram ao poder presidentes influenciados diretamente por ideólogos ligados ao tradicionalismo. Nos Estados Unidos, Steve Bannon, que ajudou a eleger Trump. Na Rússia, Alexander Dugin, que trabalhou nas sombras para Putin. No Brasil, Olavo de Carvalho, que doutrinou a base cultural da nova direita, ajudou a eleger Bolsonaro à presidência e indicou ex-alunos para postos chaves do governo. Os 3 ideólogos compartilham da rejeição à modernidade e à democracia liberal. E também a certeza de que uma nova ordem só poderá nascer com a destruição da ordem progressista. Para entender melhor essa história, vamos conversar com o autor desse livro impressionante. Impressionante em muitos sentidos. Um etnógrafo especializado em música, o americano Benjamin Teitelbaum.
Pedro, pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you too. Thank you for this opportunity. Listen, I want to congratulate you. It's an amazing book. I read it with great interest and pleasure. Incredible work.
What an honor to hear that from you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. I hope you're safe and well. And, well, I think it's an inevitable first question. How does an ethnomusicologist get to study and do such a deep research on the extreme right all around the world? Why did you start it and when?
I'd say it was an accident, actually, Pedro. In a way, this began 10 years ago when I was studying the music cultures of Northern Europe and the extreme right. And when you study music, something about the fact that we think music is harmless, I think, lets people put their heart and their soul into it, and it exposes all sorts of things about them in ways that they think. And studying the far right through its music, which is what I did initially, showed me that there was this ideological breadth there, that there was a whole environment of different ideologies. And just one of them that was very strange was called traditionalism. And it wasn't the most influential, but it was the strangest, I think. And I always was kind of following it for that reason. And I never imagined, though, that really 10 years after I started studying as a scholar, that suddenly that particular brand of the far right would find itself in a place of influence. But that's how it started.
Listen, in a few words, when people talk about the new right, what's really new about the new right?
I think that you have to think about the new right being new in terms of the language it uses. The new right today is not always about, let's say, racial supremacy or ethnic supremacy in any clear-cut way, like, let's say, the Nazis or fascists of the past are. They could as well be about simple separatism, where they oppose imperialism, they oppose colonial powers. And sometimes their language and the rhetoric and the ideology is about preserving difference and allowing for plurality and pluralism. All of those changes show that right-wing reactionary causes are adapting to the common ways that we speak today and trying to find a place for themselves within political consensus, a political consensus born of liberal democracy. So those are some ways that we see it. But I think we're starting to see more recently, Pedro, the birth of a type of new right that is more fundamentally, genuinely anti-liberal at the same time than what we have seen in the past. Part of what I studied these recent years was the ways that populist regimes around the world, if it was Donald Trump, if it was Bolsonaro, if it was in Hungary, near Putin, how they had ideologues within them that were so far beyond the bounds of what we tend to think of politics being about these days that we almost don't have words to describe them. They're genuinely anti-modern and anti-liberal in that sense. And those are some of the thinkers that I've been following. Almost a type of political position that is more radical than fascism in certain senses, more radical than Nazism. So again, I would say buried in this new right is increased strategy and adaptation to political culture today, as well as hidden underneath that a more profound and a more genuine radicalism.
In your outstanding piece of work, War for Eternity, you take your time to explain to the reader what actually is traditionalism. But how can we do it in this medium, broadcast TV? Could you explain traditionalism in, like, say, 2 minutes for Brazilian general public?
I'll do my best, Pedro. Traditionalism with a capital T, always with a capital T, really wasn't initially a political movement. It was a spiritual and a religious cause. But when it comes into politics, the way that you can think about it is that it is the pure opposite of modern progressivism. That is to say, if in most democracies around the world, we tend to think that things are going to get better, that if we pool our resources, we can reform society, we can create greater equality, greater prosperity, greater happiness, greater truth, and than has ever existed in the past, and thus that we have a bright future. We're progressives. Traditionalism rejects all of that. It tries to be the hyper opposite of it. First, it rejects the idea of progress. It doesn't believe that we are getting better. Instead, it thinks that history moves in cycles, and that most of the time things are getting worse, not better. And that we move through a time cycle, and the only time things ever get better is when things get so bad that they collapse. And then what takes the place of our old society is going to be something better that immediately starts to degrade again. So it's very pessimistic in that respect. The emancipatory, progressive, democratic, egalitarian causes that most people think of as being good, they see all those things as signs of decline and darkness.
So I could say that the difference between reactionary and traditionalists is that both think that the best part was left behind, is in the past, but reactionaries want to go back and traditionalists want to go forward and destroy the whole thing to start it all over again in this history cycle.
You put it better than I did, Pedro. Absolutely. That's the key distinction. Traditionalists don't really believe that you can ever go back to a golden age. They think that you can go forward to a golden age via destruction.
Listen, one of the main theoreticians of traditionalism was the Italian Julius Evola. René Guéron also is inspires many of these thinkers. Evola is associated to fascism. But again, what distinguishes traditionalism from fascism?
Evola was associated with fascism, but he only thought fascism was a good start. And here's the reason. He thought that fascism was still progressive and it was still modernistic and still futuristic. Remember, Hitler and Mussolini thought that they could pool the tools of modernity, science, engineering, rationalism, and create a better Germany and a more powerful Italy than had ever existed in the past. It was all about creating something new, in fact. And it was secular. And this early traditionalist thinker, Julius Evola, faulted it on both accounts. He thought that the greatest that these societies had ever been was something in the past that could potentially reoccur. And he also thought that they were too secular. So it is in this sense where some traditionalists look on fascism as being modernistic, in fact, and too progressive.
So your book has three main characters. We could call them protagonists. Steve Bannon from America, Olavo de Carvalho, the Brazilian one, and Alexander Dugin in the Russian guy. They are controversial characters in their own countries, eccentric for some, insane for others. But all of them became powerful, influential figures in the highest ranks of power, presidents, advisors. And this occurred almost simultaneously. How did that happen?
That's a wonderful question, and I can only speculate. That's because we have not seen this. Just to emphasize the way you put that, Pedro, very nicely. Traditionalism, these ideas we've been talking about, have never been in government up until this point. Julius Evola was too strange and too weird for the Nazis and ultimately for the fascists as well. They kept him at bay. So what happened these most recent years with Bannon, Olavo, Dugin is unprecedented. The speculation that I can offer about it is that discontent and dissatisfaction with liberal democracy and with globalization, it is so strong right now. And populist movements are so empowered and so dynamic that they now have created space for real radical ideas, extreme radical ideas beyond what we tend to think of as the extreme right. And that has made this set of circumstances where a few eccentric individuals have gotten their way to power with really some wild ideas outside of the mainstream ideas.